Hi and welcome to The Pursuit of Truth. Two stories that I saw on the news, Sky News, that I'm using for fair use. The first one is about, it's two things, bees and sheep. The bees thing was interesting because I saw about an Albert Einstein quote, I think it was on Facebook, about if the bees became extinct. Obviously this is just hypotheses and speculation, but if the bees became extinct, that the human race would have 4 years left to live if they didn't pollinate everything themselves. Obviously that's not an impossibility, but it was interesting to think at how you don't think of bees being that important. You just think of bees as like making honey and getting in your way and making nests where you don't really want them. We don't, we see ourselves distinct from nature and animals being part of nature and the ecosystem and all that kind of stuff. And so it's interesting when you pull a quote out like that, you start thinking about, well, wait a minute, all these things, they do things, and without them, we would have to do them if they're essential to our, I didn't realize how much bees populate. We know that they go from one plant to another, with the pollen and stuff. And that population they're doing around the world, I don't like using the word around the world because I don't know if it is around or not, but populating plants and then, so that animals can eat and we can eat and all those kinds of things. And if it wasn't done, we would have to do it. Otherwise, certain plants, I guess they wouldn't be able to populate because unlike us, they can't reproduce themselves. I suppose the wind might play a part as well, though, isn't it? The wind could blow them from one plant to another. But of course, if it's the bees that have been designed, almost seems like a design, isn't it? To do this, like if you're in SimCity. So it's interesting to think about that. And the next story that he talked about is sheep, to do with I assume it's methane or CO2, that they want to genetically modify sheep so that when they burp, I assume does it have CO2 or methane turns CO2? I don't know exactly what, but that is, polluting, but not about, it seems to be that such a disgraceful human way of tackling a problem that we created. If it's all our factories for our money and our competing and our greed and power and hunger, things I talk about on here all the time, is causing the planet, if climate change is true, causing the planet to become unstable for humanity to live on, rather than humanity solving its own problems by looking at the way we're living and stop making unnecessary things and work together and all that kind of stuff, rather than doing things for money and competition, which most businesses, that's what they're there about. Rather than sorting that out, or making everyone, giving everyone electric cars, or whatever, just to solve the problem, because the problem is you can't do that because it has money. We're tied to this idea of money in our way of life. And so then we can't solve the problems that we're creating because we've shackled ourselves with this idea that we can only live by money and by the pursuit of it. How stupid, how absolutely stupid. So rather than solve that, which is the most, the most obvious and necessary thing that needs changing, our system and money and how we interact with each other and how we see each other as a species of humanity, rather than do that, let's make the sheep genetically modify them so they can't burp out this gas, which, is part of their DNA, part of, are they going to do that to humans? Are they going to stop humans from farting, or cows next? Imagine if a sheep was able to come across and do that to you and take away one of your bodily functions that is a necessity for you. So I assume the reason why we burp is because gases inside our stomach that need coming out, because when the enzymes or whatever break down the food. Maybe we're eating the wrong type of food, but I don't know if that's true. But this is like fiddling with nature without the consequence of what that might actually entail doing. It's just, don't change the things that don't need changing, change the things that do need changing. So here's that story first, and then we'll get on to the next one.
Because it turns out they are very good at making honey, as we well know, but they're not necessarily that good for the wider environment. The problem is that since we got this narrative of peril and this campaign to save the bees, people, very well intentioned, have responded, and we've seen an enormous growth in these hives. But the trouble is that's put an enormous number of a single species, almost like a monoculture if you like, into the wider environment. And there are so many other species of bees, over 200, let alone other pollinators who are also looking for that pollen and nectar on plants, who are in many cases being bullied out by the bees. There just isn't enough food resource to go round, and you're seeing kind of halos of where there aren't enough wild pollinators around places where there are a lot of bees, particularly in places like London and some of our other cities. One of our contributors told us having hives because you're concerned about wild bees is a bit like keeping chickens because you're concerned about birds. So, moving on, we're also going to Germany, where they've got a very innovative, I think it's come into effect already, where a single travel pass for just over £40 will allow you to use all public transport anywhere in the country for a month. Yeah, that's just over £40 for any public transport for a month, with the exception of their very high-speed trains. They're doing this as a cost of living crisis response, and also to help break Germany's addiction to the car, to the Autobahn. The pilot projects have already seen traffic drop by 10%, and people seem to be loving it. Could such a thing work here? And then we move on to sheep, and I really like this bit of science. This is being done because sheep, like cows, emit a lot of methane. Actually, it comes more from the front end, more from the burps than the back end. And that makes them a powerful contributor to climate change. So this science has been done here, where you can see a sheep going to something there that looks a bit like a tumble dryer. They're actually measuring the amount of methane that comes off a sheep over an hour or so. Don't worry, if they look distressed, they do let them out. And they're trying to find out if some genetics emit less methane than others, and then they could in effect breed more climate-friendly sheep. Could be a really significant advance, might help drop the methane emissions, the climate impact of sheep, by around 15%. So, as you can see, we've got a good variety on the climate show this weekend. Some might say, a bit of a hot pot.
That was Tom Heap, who they've obviously picked because he looks a bit, not like, was it like a climate change person, you know, like a slightly hippie-ish, you know, with his big jumper and his rugged-looking face, you know, almost to sort of make us feel like, oh yeah, he's you know, he cares about nature and the climate, so we can believe him. And yet he's talking about how great this science is, that this poor sheep could be genetically modified so their burps don't have methane in them, which is part of their naturalness, because of us, the human beings, polluting. So rather than us solving the problem, which is a bit like what Germany's doing by having more trains, you know, that's getting rid of the system of money, giving £40 pass, we'll fix the animals. What next? Let's do cows, let's do elephants, let's do camels. How can anyone who cares about nature, or, you know, even the world rather than just human beings, you know, even if you claim about climate change and do this to the poor sheep, you know, that's like, it's like, you know, say your next door neighbours are doing something really bad, and instead of fixing that problem, you fix the ones next to them that aren't doing anything. The sheep are allowed to burp, and cows are allowed to let out air that have methane in them. They've been doing that since they've been in existence. It's only since we have been polluting, designing things ourselves, that so rather than us solving our problem, because we know we can't get rid of money, so we're going to fix the animals. How fucking disgusting is that? And for this guy on Sky News to sort of say, oh yeah, this is a brilliant bit of science. Is it?
No.
No, it's not. It's disgraceful. and then saying, yeah, don't worry about the animal in the big washing machine testing its burps. They do let it out. Well, would you like to be put in a chamber and checked? Would you, Tom Heap, or anyone else? Would you like to be put in a chamber and checked about how much methane you're giving out of both ends, and then told your children will be genetically modified so they don't do that anymore for the planet? Humanity, it just never ceases to rise above itself of selfishness and greed and the ways of not sorting itself out but sorting everything else out. And we're custodians of these animals and this place we found ourselves upon. Anyway, here's the next story, which I can't even remember what it's about now, so I'll play it first, then talk about it.
Thank you very much. Matthew Thompson there. Now, the World Health Organization has revealed figures which it says gives the clearest indication yet of the devastating global scale of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the World Health Statistics Report, there were almost 15 million excess deaths caused by the pandemic by the end of 2021. As a result, it estimates that more than 336 million life years were lost globally in 2020 and 2021. That is an average of around 22 years of life per excess death. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has more details.
This is the WHO putting together its World Health Statistics Report, giving us an overview of health systems across the world, and especially now in 2023, how they've coped with the pandemic. And as you would expect, the pandemic has had a real impact on those health systems. But when you look at their key headline on this report, it's quite staggering, really. The WHO has estimated that 336.8 million years of life have been lost because of the pandemic. That's 22 years of life lost for every excess death. They say some of the gains that we saw previously in tropical diseases like malaria and TB, they've been reversed. So there's a real concern that the gains made there, they're being reversed because of the inequalities in health systems. Climate change is impacting global health in a big way. And also the worry is the gains we've made on those on the treatment of infectious diseases, there is a rise in the number of NCDs, non-communicable diseases like cancer, strokes, Alzheimer's, diseases that can't be passed from one person to another. And these set of data goes up until 2022. So some real concerns expressed by the World Health Organization about the impact COVID has had on health inequalities across the world, and identifying where the work still needs to be done.
There you go. So not to underestimate that, but what a world we live in where, you know, we'll carry on our daily lives. I don't know, just fathom, you know, just think these people in power who are not awake to reality of humanity, of its suffering, of these things, you know, that some of them preventable. I'm sure a lot of the excess deaths to COVID happen in countries where, you know, their hospital system, their infrastructure is not as good as, say, the West. And why? Because we want to compete against each other, and have stupid wars so we can brainwash each other to kill each other. People we don't even know, people that may be exactly like us, have families, have hearts, have dreams, you know, may not even believe in those people that are in charge. But still they have to go fight for their patriotism that we've created because we've ring-fenced one set of human beings and called them this to compete against another. What a world we live in. It's disgraceful, really, because a lot of this life, you know, we could have built the hospital infrastructures and the infrastructure of the country because humans know how to do it because we do it in the West or in other countries or wherever. It's known. We know how to build a New York or a London or whatever, or Dubai or whatever you want to call the pinnacle of human evolution when it comes to infrastructure. But we don't want to share it. We want to do it because everything has to have a price tag, and everything has to, we can't do that because then, if we help out the poorer countries, then where we're going to get all our labour from? All these big countries and companies outsourcing and buying things from smaller countries, poorer countries, so that they can then make lots of money and become rich and sit in their thrones and laugh and eat and drink wine and feel that they're better than anyone else, that they're, philanthropic or they're good human beings. But a lot of these powerful, rich people, they're obviously not really looking at what they're doing, how this system is working, the rich over the poor. I'm not talking about inside of the UK, I'm talking about those poor countries in the Middle East and in China and in India, where all these major Western companies outsource to, where they get less, they can pay less money for the same job. But it's not about the job, it's about them making more money, about them taking advantage of a system that's been created where it has these different tiers of humanity in. And therefore those people, they think they're doing well, but they're still suffering. And, buying cobalt or whatever and silicon and whatever from poor countries at a good price, because then they can make loads of money selling phones and computers and TVs and etc. How absolutely disgraceful is humanity? And these people at the top, these people, on the media and everyone else who's just keeping it going and keeping a light shone on it, like these are, let's make a biopic about Steve Jobs or whoever, showing how great they were. When you look at the minor details, you see how, I'm not talking about Steve Jobs, but people in general, human beings in the rich parts of the world are taking advantage of this tier system of rich versus poor. And then leading to all these deaths. And then let's talk about all these deaths. Oh dear, that's so terrible. Let's set up a charity and make loads of money and still not sort the fucking problem out. Charity's been around for hundreds of years and still the same things are still going. Because the charities can never solve the problem, because the problem is the way our system is. The way that we put money above everything else. Above humanity. The only intrinsic real truth. Anyway, take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.